A young boy with white hair recalls a memory. On his 5th birthday, he collapsed and had a nightmare. In his dream, a man with white hair similar to his knelt before a black-haired man and a group of women. The white-haired man was breathing hard, covered in blood and wounds. The black-haired man raises his sword, an angry and determined expression on his face. He swings it down with all his might and cuts clean down on the white-haired man's neck. The sound of cutting flesh echoes in the young boy's head as he clutches at his own throat. All because of that nightmare, he finally remembered. The world he currently was in was a game he knew very well. And Luke, the white-haired man from the dream and the villain that gets killed in that scene, was the young boy. Luke had loved that game. It was set in a fantasy world full of love and war, intended for adults. The game's protagonist was the man known to be the strongest swordsman, the Sword Emperor, who is currently enjoying his life at the academy at the time the game's story starts. It was a story where he could fall in love and train with his companions to grow stronger before finally defeating the evil Duke's family, planning a coup d'etat, which is basically a rebellion to seize the throne. Luke was the second son of that very same evil Duke. Luke remembers how in the game, the original Luke had a terrible nickname, the Gross Fat Toad. The Luke from the game messed with the protagonist and his allies like a horrid tyrant while hiding behind his family's authority. People use that nickname to mock his awful appearance and personality. The kid is cute now, but the adult version isn't, that great. Since it was a game for adults, there were hardcore scenes too, that the current Luke wasn't able to handle well back when he played the game. Honestly don't want to think, much less know, what those scenes were about. Yikes! The reason given for the original Luke's horrible personality was that his mother died immediately after giving birth to him, and nobody in his family cared about him. As a result, he did evil deeds to earn his family's recognition, but he neglected his training and developed an inferiority complex. Nothing ever came of his talent for magic he had since birth, and he ended up being used as a sacrificial pawn for the Duke. He didn't even serve as a mid-level boss. His one and only purpose was to be killed off. The young Luke, the one who got sent into the game, now lay sick in bed. Holding out his small hands in front of him, he thinks of how both he and the protagonist are supposed to be 15 when the game starts. With a thoughtful expression, he thinks of the version of Luke he sees in the game and questions if that was how he turns out in 10 years. You look that old at 15, bro. Looking out the window, Luke thinks how he didn't want to die. He still had memories from his previous life, so he didn't need his new family to love him. He figures that if he stops himself from becoming the gross fat Toad, his words, not mine, and doesn't do any evil deeds, then he might be able to change the future. With a more hopeful and happy expression, he dreams of a future where he can live the rest of his life in peaceful happiness. Luckily, he was a noble, so he wouldn't have to worry about making a living.
But his happy expression drops. Luke realizes that he can't change the fact that his family was evil. He won't be able to escape the purge that's coming for them, but he wanted to have enough power to defend himself at the very least. He certainly remembers that Luke supposedly had a talent for magic. He stares at his hands and concentrates, realizing he can feel some sort of airy, souls-like energy, and wonders if that was mana flowing through him. Imagining a game system screen, he wonders how to use magic without a user interface. He remembers that a magic caster should be able to heal himself, so he presses his hands to his chest and chants for himself to heal. Light softly envelops his body. When the light fades, he wonders if it works, since he couldn't really check without a game's health bar. But he did feel a little better. Putting his hands back to his chest, he tries to get even better, chanting for himself to heal over and over until he eventually tilts sideways and passes out. Before long, sunlight was pouring in through the window. The door to his room creaks open, and a voice calls out to him, telling him to get up and asking how he was feeling. A freshly healed Luke slowly wakes up, realizing it was morning. He rolls over in bed feeling sluggish, but no longer ill. He wonders if he lost consciousness because he ran out of mana. He supposes that meant he only had enough mana for 10 heals or so. 10 heals is plenty for a 5-year-old though. That means he's crazy talented. Wow! A maid comes up to him as he thinks that he wouldn't understand anything unless he takes the time to study magic. His maid wonders out loud if he was still feeling under the weather and helps him change from his pajamas. Luke believes it would be best if he had somebody to teach him. However, his father probably wouldn't give him a tutor, even if he asked for one. In that case, self-study it was. Luke calls for Syrup to read him a book. Syrup was the name of his maid, a dog beast man who was currently 12 years old. Wagging her tail, she agrees to his request. Later on, Luke hands her a book on magic fundamentals, and Syrup checks with him that he really did want her to read such a difficult book for him. She suggests a picture book instead, holding up one she personally liked called Hakan, the Loyal Dog. Of course, not to be confused with Hachiko, the best doggo. Luke replies that he wanted to try to learn how to use magic. With his best poppy eyes, he pleads with Syrup to read it to him. With a face like that, I can't believe that's how he turns out when he's older. His cuteness shoots an arrow straight to Syrup's heart, and she agrees. As Syrup sits down, Luke lies down on the sofa with his head on Syrup's lap. She laughs that he really was still a boy. Luke asks Syrup to teach him how to read and do math while she was at it, adding that she was the only one he could rely on. With sparkling eyes, she excitedly tells him to leave it to her. Hyped up, she suggests that maybe they should take the opportunity to start training too.
Luke observes that dog beastmen like Syrup have traits similar to dogs, like enjoying exercise. Completely straightforward and with a careless smile on his face, Luke disagrees with her. She loses her earlier excitement at his words, and thus Luke began being taught by Syrup. However, as she reads through the book, Syrup stammers, reading the words the whole time. With a teasing smile, Luke comments how amazed he is that she could read long and difficult words. With tears in her eyes out of embarrassment, she asks if she was really useful, and Luke reassures her that she was, but internally he thinks that the book may have been too difficult to read. He sums up magic fundamentals from what Syrup read out loud. Mana was a transparent energy floating in the air around everyone. The amount one can use and the power of someone's spells depends on their talent. Luke figured that soul-like feeling in the air he felt while he was sick really was mana, and as expected, it seems that Luke really does have a talent for magic. For casting spells, one could cast a spell simply by imagining and letting their mana flow to where they want it to go. Luke was able to use heal because he imagined his mana healing him. And finally, the difference between attributeless magic and attribute magic was that attributeless magic was basic magic anyone could use, while attributed magic requires a special talent to use. According to the book, most nobles are able to use attribute magic. The Dostatos family, Luke's noble family, had an especially excellent lineage. Luke figured that maybe he would be able to use attribute magic before long. As he continues to listen to Syrup talk, he slowly drifts off to sleep. Syrup takes notice and carries him to bed, tucking him in. Gently caressing his head, she smiles softly and promises to make sure to keep him safe. A year passes. Luke is focusing his mana. The total amount of mana he could use in one day has increased. He found out that he could improve the amount of mana he can store inside his body by using it all up every day. It was really rough when he first started training, since he was fainting all the time, which horrified Syrup. As he reads through the books in the Annex library, Luke mourns that it was a pity that he still hasn't been able to find a suitable magic teacher. The Annex that he lived in only had a head butler and 3 maids, so there was a limit to what he could learn from them alone. He searches through the library's shelves for more books. He learned to read and started studying. Luke was thinking of ways to avoid his fate of being a gross fat toad. First on his list of changes, he had to take care of his health. From how the original and older Luke looked in the game, it was clear that there was a lot that could be improved in terms of health. The Luke in game had acne, blemishes, warts, cracked skin, was obese, and among other things. Apparently people in his current world don't bathe and wash their faces daily. That's nasty, not gonna lie.
Holding a hand up, Syrup marvels as bubbles clung to her hands. Luke tells her to use the bubbles to wash her face. Luke and Syrup were sitting on the floor of his room, in front of basins of water, prepping bubbly soap in their hands. Syrup asks Luke if there was a reason the soap was so foamy, and Luke casually answered that he had delicate skin, so it was to wash it more gently. Syrup pauses in shock. With horror, she exclaims in disbelief that he had delicate skin. Internally, Luke says that Syrup wouldn't know that unless she's seen what he ends up looking like in the future. Carelessly, he tells her that it wasn't a problem right at that moment, so she didn't have to worry about it. But she disagreed. With a content smile, Syrup tells him that as his personal maid, she would learn his routine. Luke shares her soft smile, and thus the two of them started doing their skincare routine twice a day. Luke wants to be rich enough to use high-class products without worrying about the costs. He wants to be able to buy soap, face lotions, body lotion, moisturizer, and sunscreen. Later on, Luke uses his magic to carry a bucket of water into his bathtub, which has him multitasking, practicing his magic while getting ready for a bath. While in the bath at the veranda, Syrup complains that she couldn't get used to washing her body like that. Luke lets her know that he was glad that she took the time to learn how, because in a year's time, her skin will be completely smooth, and if she keeps the habit up, he's sure she'll grow up to be quite a beauty. There's a pause between the both of them before Syrup admits that she noticed that Luke has got all kinds of things in his mind. Looking at Luke, who almost seemed to sparkle, she tells him that he even seemed to look much healthier than he used to. Syrup adds that recently, the two of them had even started taking turns cooking. Luke had decided that he needed to change his diet early on. He told the head butler that he didn't need any meals served from then on. The butler was a little flustered, but agreed nonetheless. Luke seemed to always feel awful after eating, using his magic to heal himself at night. He guessed that maybe the dishes from his current world just didn't sit right with him. Ever since he started preparing dishes from his previous world that he thought would be good for him, his health improved. And during his meals, it looked like he didn't have anything wrong with his digestive system. Syrup continues that he stopped sleeping in late every morning. Luke had started getting up early to fix his daily routine, making sure to go outside every day to get some sun. Syrup was glad that he could go outside now. He has started taking walks and doing some light exercise. Syrup tries again to suggest that they start training, but Luke immediately shuts the idea down with a smile. He didn't really like exercising so much that it was out of the question.
Luke calls out to Syrup, and with a solemn expression, he tells her that he wants to live a healthy, easygoing life. Syrup repeats his words, a worried look on her face, and Luke says yes. He continues that he thinks that it'll be quite difficult to live an easygoing life. Syrup asks again, confused, and Luke explains that if he only continues to eat and sleep, he'll become something terrible very quickly. Syrup is surprised and reasons that he was so cute for that to happen, to which Luke agrees, yes, bruh, earn your cute side. Internally, Luke thinks how he really couldn't imagine how the original Luke turned out like that. He feels like he has a lot of potential, so he'd like to grow up handsome if he could. Luke continues that eating and sleeping all day every day would also mean he'd have a terribly lot of time on his hands. Syrup asked if he meant because he was a noble, and he answered that leisure isn't leisure if it's all someone does. I know he's supposed to be older internally, but Syrup isn't questioning why this 6-year-old is so philosophical. Luke compares how if someone went to the amusement park at the casino every day, it quickly becomes less fun. And judging how his father treated him, he was going to sacrifice Luke and leave him dead sooner or later. He may have been born a noble, but there was no safety net for him. The original Luke misused his privileged upbringing, leading himself to ruin, but the Luke right now planned on making sure to make the most of it and prepare for the future. Determined, he decided that since his childhood is privileged, he'd like to avoid any unnecessary hardships. After all, he was planning to have a wife support him in the future. And if he couldn't marry, he needed to find a source of income that allows him to live without worries, even if he was on his own. If he could make one choice that would change the course of his future, it would be in not going to the Alice Royal Academy. The Luke in game is a character who mainly appears in the Academy arc of the game. After all, the game is split into 2 major arcs. First was the Academy arc, which was focused on romance and training the player's characters, and the second was the War arc, where the player had to resolve the incident caused by the villain. Amazingly enough, this sounds like Fire Emblem Three Houses, and I can say that I understand why Luke loved the game. He strategized that mastering both arcs would be his ticket to getting ahead in life. If he didn't attend the Academy, his odds of survival would increase dramatically. And yet, Luke still had a reason to attend. He thinks of the game he once loved to play. In the Academy, one would be able to find those very same characters. And he loved them all. He smiled in excitement at the idea. He wanted to enjoy the game world as Luke, and by that he meant he wanted to be a happy slacker. Speaking with Syrup again, she gets a sneaky smile on her face as she reasons with Luke that if he wanted to live an easygoing and healthy life, then he should learn swordsmanship. Immediately, Luke shuts down the idea again, putting pressure in his words as he says that he would prefer to move as little as possible. Syrup combs through his hair with a flustered expression, trying to convince him that not only was it fun, but it would also help him protect himself. Internally, Luke smiles at how Syrup really liked the idea of swordsmanship. Luke retorts that he didn't need to learn swordsmanship when he had Syrup. Syrup is surprised, asking how he found out that she was learning swordsmanship. Luke admits that he just had a feeling. With a content smile, he tells her that he'll leave the sword fighting to her, and Syrup agrees happily. She bids him good night and leaves the room. As Luke lay in bed, he thinks about how he knew that he kept refusing every offer she made to exercise, but he reasons with himself that there was no getting around moving around at least a little if he wants to stay healthy. But that was why he invented a new spell. The next morning, Luke steps out of the annex. He raises his hands and a jelly-like substance comes out, forming a large slime. It's so cute and happy. It was an original attributeless magic Luke called Val. His new spell can work while he sleeps. But before someone can understand how Val works, one needs to understand that attributeless magic is basic magic that transforms mana into various forms. It can mostly be divided into 5 major categories. First was daily life magic. Quite self-explanatory, it was magic that helps the user out with daily tasks such as light for illumination and clean for cleaning a laundry. Luke figured that because people in the game world didn't bathe much because the clean spell already existed. Second, there was strength magic. It was magic that uses mana to temporarily enhance attributes like strength, dexterity, or defense. How strong the user can become depends on their original strength, but in exchange, it sacrifices the user's endurance. The effect varies a lot from person to person depending on how well they train their bodies. Just about everyone could use those 2 spells. Third was enchantment magic. This was a special school of magic that enhances the user's weapon with attributes. It was another form of buff magic that only smiths and enchanters could use. Even Luke's didn't have an idea how to use it.
Fourth was support magic. This school of magic consists of buffing and debuffing other people. The effect's power depends on how well the user can imagine it and how specific it is. For example, become strong made someone become physically stronger. Strength in the arms will grow 3-fold, made mana support the muscles to give someone triple the strength in their arms. To use it, the user has to cover the target in mana to support them. And finally, the fifth one was restoration magic. It uses mana precisely to stimulate the body and make it recover. The effect depended on how well the user understands bones, muscles, blood, and the body in general. Thanks to his education in his past life, he was quite good at restoration magic. Let us all be thankful for modern-day understanding of anatomy and physiology. All the attributeless magic schools rely on transforming mana, and that was what Luke used to create Val, a self-sufficient type of spell. Luke thinks of how easy it is to use as he orders Val to fetch a glass of water from a table. Floating over to the glass, Val sucks it up in his jelly-like body and delivers it to Luke. All Luke had to do was give it an order. But now here comes the real test. Sitting down and lying down his head on the table, Luke tells Val that he was leaving everything to it. He lay still on the table as Val stuck itself to him. Val had ordered it earlier to envelop his body while he was sleeping, and it did so, to exercise his body instead of him actually exercising. That's quite the next level of laziness. Work smart, not hard, I guess. Val used his body to run laps, practice martial arts, and do jumping jacks. If Luke can exercise while unconscious, then staying healthy would be a piece of cake. Breathing heavily, Luke takes control of his body once more. As Val lets go, Luke gives Val a thankful look, deciding that that was enough for the day. Val smiles at him, proud. He heads back to the annex thinking how wonderful it was that it can move on its own. With this tactic, he can train while remaining easygoing. Luke lay down on the sofa. Unfortunately, he got muscle aches after using Val. He looks to the table beside him, stacked with books. Everything is going well for him, but there is still so much to do. His stomach rumbles. He murmurs to himself that it's still afternoon and he was already hungry. He reasons that he did just exercise and he was still growing. Getting up in a rush, he decides that too much moderation is also a bad thing. He goes to Syrup to ask for dessert and eats it happily, reminding himself that what he was working towards was merely the life of a lazy, villainous noble. It's 5 years later. Luke is 11 years old and Syrup is 17 years old.
While Luke is sitting on a floating cushion, focused on reading a book, Syrup is dutifully standing by his side, her expression rather nervous. Luke mutters words to himself every now and then, fully content in his position, before Syrup hesitantly calls out to him. He snaps out of reading his book and turns to her. With a yell, she asks how he was floating in midair. Apparently, Luke had realized there's no real difference between carrying a glass of water and carrying himself, so it would be a pain to explain to Syrup since she's so bad at magic. So instead, he chooses to dodge the question. He asks Syrup if she wants to ride the cushion, already sitting up. Syrup asks for permission, and Luke grants it. The cushion is lowered, and Luke gets off. As Syrup nervously gets on the cushion, he tells her there was no need to be scared, since he was using mana to properly support it. Once she settles in, Vignal begins rising up into the air. Syrup braces herself, but as she opens her eyes, she has a dazzled expression on her face. She turns to Luke, eyes sparkling, as she tells him that she had never experienced anything as comfortable as that before, to which Luke is glad to hear. Syrup raises a hand and brings up the question of how come, even though all he does is always reading or sleeping, his body is still so well trained. He's just 11 at this point, bro. Luke figured that it was no surprise that Syrup's confused about that, as she's only ever seen him take walks. He tells her that he didn't mind sharing how. Syrup helps him into a more comfortable set of clothes, and they leave the annex, stepping into open ground. He tells her to watch as he bunches up his mana and solidifies it into a ball, doing so, as he explains, before touching his chest. Syrup flinches at the sudden shift in Luke's eyes. A burst of mana comes from him as Val takes control. Val has evolved a lot over the past 5 years. With his comprehension of it, he realized something new over the past 5 years of diligent practice. As Val takes control, Luke loses awareness of everything around him, including Syrup's presence. Luke had learned to master martial arts, making a succession of powerful moves, kicking the air and throwing strong punches. Syrup exclaims in amazement. Syrup asks what was going on and how he had said he always hated intense exercise, but Luke doesn't respond, carrying on with his exercises, much to Syrup's confusion. With one final punch, Luke brings his fists back close to him and breathes deeply. He lets out an exhausted sigh before turning to Syrup and asking for her thoughts.
Excitedly, Syrup exclaims how amazing he is. She lately jogs to him, telling him how surprised she is that he was working so hard, but Luke responds that he hasn't really worked hard. Syrup yells, confused, as she reasons that his movements were those of a master. She adds that she's never seen anyone who could move in a similar manner, not even martial arts. Luke laughs at her words. Holding his hand up, he shows her his mana and tells her it was a new spell he's created that he called Trace. He absorbed Val into his body and passes his memories to it directly from his brain. He had it create the movements of his favorite martial arts masters.
Though he himself has forgotten the exact movements, Val is able to dig them up and mimic them perfectly. Depending on the title, Val is even able to mix in moves from his favorite fighting games and manga. That's so overpowered, what in the world? All the knowledge he has of fighting styles and their histories ended up being combined into his own personal fighting style. As such, Luke wraps up his explanation that he isn't even conscious about how he moves, so he can't say that he's been working hard. But still, he admits that he gets to train his body to grow stronger, he even gains some muscle memory, so it's quite convenient. Syrup says that the floating spell is amazing on its own, but to even invent another new spell. Syrup tells him that he's a genius, but Luke disagrees. Syrup continues to convince him, saying that he's only 11 years old and has already caught a glimpse of the mysterious abyss that is magic. Syrup is so cute and silly. Luke laughs and tells her that he didn't know what she was talking about, but he chalks it up to her, saying that she had a hard time understanding. Luke thought it was understandable. After all, he got all the knowledge from his previous life, and he still doesn't really understand how it works. Stepping back into the annex, Luke tells Syrup that he was tired from the workout, and she offers to prepare a change of clothes for him. But Luke insists on taking a short bath while he was at it. So they head to a spring in the forest. It is the closest source of water they can use to bathe in. Looking at Syrup from his place in the springs, he thinks of how the other maids are always talking about how beautiful Syrup has recently become. She's kept up with the beauty regimen he taught her for 5 whole years, and it feels like her beauty has reached another level. We love a queen with a skincare routine. She's also kept up her swordsmanship training and really polished her fierceness. As Luke steps out of the spring and changes into new clothes, he calls for Syrup, and she immediately comes towards him, wagging her tail. Despite everything she's become, she still acts like a loyal dog who gets overjoyed by Luke simply saying her name.
Laughing, Luke thinks that seeing the cute side of Syrup is his special privilege. They're back in the annex. Luke tells Syrup that he has a job for her. He asks her to tell his father that he wants his magic attribute to be determined, to which Syrup follows through immediately as she steps out of the room. Back in his floating cushion, Luke leans back with a content smile, looking forward to his guest. Attribute magic, where someone can use the attribute they were born with, is called the power determined by God. In this game world, if somebody tells a magic user what it is, that user will be able to use their attribute. The Ministry of Magic of Alcedas would be the one to determine it. They manage all attribute spells in the kingdom. It's a place where only the greatest of sorcerers of the world gather, meaning that someone belonging to that elite group will be coming to tell Luke about his attribute, which is a privilege granted to the nobility. Apparently, it seems that some people didn't have attributes, but Luke casually leans back with an easy smile, thinking how he didn't have to worry. Even among noble families, the Dustos family all have especially excellent attributes. His stepmother has rock, his older sister has seduction, his older brother has iron, and finally his father has sand. With an excited smile, he wonders what attribute he had. The following day, there was a knock on the door. Luke opens it from his floating cushion, realizing his mistake a second too late. A man enters, exclaiming at the sight of a beautiful girl riding a floating cushion. Luke turns to him, wondering who he was and why he assumed he was a girl. Thinking about it some more, Luke did originally look quite good, and he's done his best to maintain his beauty regimen, but he wonders if he really did look that cute. Own your cuteness, Luke. You look absolutely adorable. Syrup comes in and introduces the man to be Malsa Gleo, the chief of the Ministry of Magic's Attribute Bureau. Syrup leaves his side to stand beside Luke. Malsa pauses and fixes his glasses before calling out to Syrup, which has Luke on edge. But Malsa happily states how amazing Syrup's memory was, memorizing her entire title despite only hearing it once. He adds that it was to be expected from a servant of the Dustos family, and he commends her again for not slipping up. Syrup proudly replies that it was only natural. Getting down to business, Malsa asks where the young master of the Dustos family was. Syrup turns to Luke and introduces him as Luke Hullo Dustos. It's my first time hearing his government name, and he really does sound like a noble. Malsa apologizes in a panic for being rude. Luke thinks back to Malsa's words and wonders if he really did just praise her. Civil man was anyone who isn't a demi-human, a beast man of the spirit races, or a demon. The state church holds the doctrine of civil man supremacy, which teaches that everyone but the civil people should be scorned. Does that mean Luke being assigned with Syrup is supposed to be another way that he was being disrespected in his own household? That would be crazy. Luke thought for a moment that Malsa would berate her and prepared to take action, but he's sure that Malsa isn't a bad person. He hops off of the floating cushion and heads over to Malsa. Luke calls him Malson, which is both a good pun and very cute. Holding out a hand, Luke tells him to just call him by name. With a warm smile, Malsa shakes his outstretched hand. They sit down on sofas across from one another as Malsa tells him that they were starting. He asks Luke to close his eyes, and as he does so, Luke hears a sigh of relief. He wonders if Malsa was nervous. Malsa raises a wand, sleep, and sloth. Luke's eyes widened as he heard him say those words. The moment Malsa did so, the attributes inside of Luke came to be. Or it would be better to say that he realized something he'd always known. With a joyful expression, Luke mutters how amazing it was. He tells Malsa that he really does suddenly understand what kind of magic he could use just by saying the attributes. Malsa explains that among attribute magic, there are certain unique ones called rare magic. both of Luke's attributes would be classified under rare magic. Our boy truly is special in every way. Malsa continues that usually, all attribute magic is recorded and made publicly available. But they had a custom of keeping rare magic secret. He asks whether it was fine with Luke if they recorded his abilities simply as magic that influences the human body, to which Luke agrees. Luke asks if there were other ways to utilize his magic, since there were only simple ways of fusing them popping in his head. Maltz answers that everybody has certain spells they're more suited for than others, regardless of attribute. He says that Luke can improve his abilities by researching his attributes, and saying that it's the only way to master magic.
With a determined smile, Luke tells Malsa that he would keep it in mind. As he starts packing, Malsa smiles at Luke's enthusiasm, but he's knocked out of his thoughts when Luke speaks again. He says that he's quite surprised that appraisal magic was a thing, which makes Malsa flinch. In a panic, he asks how Luke knows about appraisal magic. Calmly, he answers that he thought it was quite obvious with how Malsa just appraised his attributes. Internally, Luke thinks about how since he was a reincarnator, he just figured it was a thing, but now he knew it was supposed to be a secret. Malsa tries to explain, but then he starts choking. Luke orders syrup to get some tea for him. They take a break to enjoy their tea, and Malsa comments that it was delicious. Luke comments that it's an herbal tea that's good for the body, and Malsa agrees that it helped clear his head. He asks what the tea is called, but Luke reveals that he actually grew the leaves himself, so Malsa wouldn't be able to buy it from a market. Instead, he offers to give him a few leaves to take home. Luke assumes that he should keep the idea of appraisal magic a secret, which Malsa thankfully agrees with. Malsa mentions that he's sure that his daughter will like the tea as well, and Luke asks about her. Malsa tells him that the girl is about his age who really likes magic. Suddenly gaining a sudden burst of energy, Malsa excitedly asks Luke about the spell used for the flying cushion, since it was definitely not average magic. Luke pauses, and Malsa apologizes for his sudden outburst, but Luke brushes his apology off. Luke proceeds to show Malsa how Axel works. A confused Syrup watches them chat. Soon the sun was setting. Malsa thanks Luke for his time, but before he leaves, Luke asks if he could be his tutor. Malsa admits that he personally didn't think Luke needed a tutor, so he asks what Luke really wanted. Luke explains that what he was looking for was someone he could write letters to ask for answers to questions about parts of magic he didn't understand. Malsa clarifies that he wanted to be pen pals, and he smiles, interested in the idea. Luke excitedly asks if he was agreeing. Malsa asks in turn if it was alright for him to ask Luke questions in turn. Luke readily agrees, although stating that he might not be able to answer all of them. And with that, they had a deal. Luke finally had a tutor. Thanks to Malsa, he grew quite knowledgeable about magic.
In contrast to attributeless magic, where the user can transform mana freely according to their imagination, attributed spells have certain rules they must follow depending on the attribute. Appraisal made Luke realize his own inherent magic. Inherent magic is what they call the basic spells of their attribute. For example, the beginner spells of fire are Pilot Light to produce a flame, Fireball, which tightens and solidifies mana, and finally Fire Arrow to fire the solidified mana. The rest is all up to the user's own knowledge and practice. Luke's attribute, Sleep, has 3 inherent magic spells too. First is Sleep, which puts a target to sleep. The effect varies depending on the amount of mana the user injects, as well as the target's resistance, so the user can fine-tune it to some degree. Second is Sleep Timer, which allows the user to define the period of sleep through touch. The affected target won't wake up for the designated period no matter what happens. And finally, Sleep Delete, which allows you to forcefully dispel any sleep magic. Magic can be defended against through magic resistance and defensive magic, but if they don't know about it, Luke can put people to sleep before they understand the situation. If he uses Sloth too, he's sure they'd have no idea what's going on. His powers are really scary when you think about it. He could knock you out and stab you, and you wouldn't know. Excitedly, he thinks of how both of his attributes are so amazing, they might as well be cheats. You got that right, Mr. Basically won the magic ability lottery. But if there was a fire arrow, Luke wanted there to be a sleep arrow too. If there was, he would be able to put people to sleep even from a distance. He grins as he thinks about putting a teacher to sleep and being able to skip classes as much as he wants. With the letters from Malsa on his lap, he thinks of the never-ending different spells he wants to experiment with. He gets up and stretches, happy at the thought that no amount of time would be enough to test everything out. Luke continued training hard under Val's guidance. He's gotten into the habit of giving Val control of his body and practicing all morning. It clears his head so he can focus on his magic experimentation. Val leaves his body once more as Luke finishes his daily workout. The moment it does so, Luke's stomach lets out a loud grumble, so he decides to make some food for himself.
Syrup calls from the annex. Meal? Luke nods, stomach loud. He grabs a towel and clean clothes, heading to the forest spring while she cooks. Her food is edible, never great. He'll fix it later. At 11, worries already stack up. In the spring, a small voice wails about dying alone. Luke surfaces, calls out, rustling. A girl squeaks, "People are here." He steps out, dressed but damp, peeks behind an oak. The girl screams, fair, at the sudden sight. She stammers, face red. Luke, clueless, thinks she's one of Iris's tea party guests. He
He asks if she's here for his sister. Her face flips to awe at Iris's name, then shock. He's the brother? Drawing off, he says his name. She shrieks, steps back, curtsies low. Karen Claudia Caribbean, daughter of Count Caribbean, 12 years old. Luke grins. Caribbean, like the sea. You're funny. Karen blushes hard, totally dazzled. Completely reasonable reaction. Part 2. Luke kneels down, holding out a hand for her to grab as he asks her if she can use attribute magic. They both stand up. Karen's saying that she can use magic and she really likes it. Luke asks to see her attribute magic. Leaning down, she lifts his skirt a bit and produces a heart-shaped pouch that produces a ladle. Weird place to keep your stuff, but I'm not about to judge. She continuously pulls out object after object, from a plate of vegetables to plates and other cutlery. As she's doing so, she awkwardly tells Luke that she'll show him her magic shortly, and so she asks him to put some clothes on first. Leaving to do just that, Luke thinks of Karen's pouch, his curiosity piqued at how it seems to be a magical pouch that can store a ton of things. Karen raises her knife as she tells him about her attribute magic. Her attribute magic was cooking. She cuts through vegetables at a quick yet precise pace, mixing and cooking with skill before topping them off with seasonings. Tasting her creation, Karen makes a satisfied expression. Plating off the dish, she presents a spiced moon rabbit soup she prepared with only ingredients she had on hand. Luke, now fully clothed, takes out a spoonful of the soup, relishing how it smelled delicious and wondering what's different about food cooked with attribute magic. He takes a mouthful and completely stops, his eyes going wide, internally exclaiming how crazy delicious it is. To best describe it, it felt like he went through a religious experience. He takes scoop after scoop, amazed that he's never had anything so tasty before, not even in his past life. Garen watches him eating excitedly with a proud expression on her face. Suddenly, Luke stops short again. He stares at an empty plate. He could have licked the dish clean with how much it was sparkling. Placing a hand on his stomach, he gets a confused look on his face. What's more to the soup, he could feel power welling up inside him. He'd come to the conclusion that it was able to buff magic as well. Karen was a young, noble lady capable of cooking, buffing dishes. Seeing her in a new light, Luke comes to the great conclusion that she's the greatest possible asset to support the slothful life he's aiming for. He excitedly decides that he isn't letting her get away. Calling for Karen's attention, he slides to the end of the table close to where she sat and asks charmingly if she would cook the soup for him every day when they grew up. Ooh, this sneaky little man. Karen's eyes widened in shock. With an even more charming smile, Luke asks her to marry him right then and there. OMG. Internally, Luke is resolute and will happily marry into Karen's family. He figures she'd support him even when his family eventually gets crushed. And above all, he needed her incredibly tasty cooking. With completely dazzled eyes, she exclaims in excitement that Luke has just proposed to her. That day, Luke had a miraculous encounter. Later on, back in the annex, he has Syrup contact his father after his meeting with Karen to have the proposal made official. But all his father sent was a message for Luke to do as he liked. Luke thanks Syrup for delivering the message, but internally, he thinks of how his father really didn't have any interest in him at all. Eventually, everything proceeded swiftly, and soon the families were arranged to meet. As Luke steps out of his carriage, Count Caribbean, Karen's father, greets him warmly to his restaurant. Luke replies with a greeting of his own. They enter the restaurant, and Luke tries to apologize for his father not joining the marriage talks, but Count Caribbean reassures him that the Duke d'Ostantus dropped by, gave his greetings, and left right after. Count Caribbean invites Luke to take a seat at a dining table. Internally, Luke is rather in disbelief that the head of a high-ranking noble family isn't attending the marriage meeting of his own son, but he doesn't quite want. Looking at Karen's soft demeanor, he was worried that the Duke might have been too intimidating for her. They sit around the dining table, and Luke opens the conversation by stating that since he was only the second son, all he can offer is himself. So he asks if it would be okay if he married into the Caribbean family. Bro, no matter how lazy you are, you're still a walking powerhouse, and that's more than anything you can offer. With a bright smile, Count Caribbean replies that the family would be glad to have him. He excitedly adds that Karen had already said that she really loves him, much to Karen's embarrassment.
Her face falls, and without looking at Luke, she asks him if he was sure that it was okay for him to marry someone like her. Suddenly panicked, Count Caribbean says that although he heard that Luke was the one to propose, some girls mock Karen for her appearance, so he was worried about that. Luke puts two and two together. Count Caribbean was talking about Luke's older sister, Iris, who at 12 years old would question other young girls' appearances. Apparently, she treats everyone except her favorite pretty girls very harshly. Casting a glance at Taryn, Luke observes that she certainly is a little chubby, but reasons that she's still developing. He adds that he actually found her round face rather cute. Luke, you're starting to sound sus. With a joyful laugh, Count Caribbean tells Luke that he was truly grateful that there was a boy like him who chose Karen for her inner beauty. Internally, Luke says sorry. Though he wasn't sorry, he didn't want to marry her because she was a good person. But what drew him in was her cooking and status. He thinks of the soup Karen made him for the first time, a blissful expression on his face. He snapped out of his thoughts when Count Caribbean starts to talk about his family. Apparently, everyone goes to sea frequently. I love that the family named after the Caribbean Sea are regularly at sea. He observes that it looks like Luke's quite weak to the sun and asks if he'll be all right. The Caribbean family started as fishermen and traders. They're a family that handles a wide array of maritime businesses. Because Karen didn't have any brothers, Luke would end up inheriting the house. But if she later gets a little brother, Luke decided he'd gladly give up the position to them. The idea of just opening up a restaurant with Karen's cooking schools was a nice thought for Luke. He finally turns to Count Caribbean and lets him know that he trains, so he should be sturdier than he looks. And with a proud expression, he states that his countermeasures against the sun are in perfect order, so there was no need to worry. Said countermeasure was sunscreen. Luke also figures that he could just summon Vol on the ship and then just go to sleep. That way he wouldn't get seasick and he could use it to carry luggage for him. Count Caribbean stands up, giving Luke and Karen time to talk. Luke calls Count Caribbean father-in-law, and with a joyful laugh and wave goodbye, the Count jokingly says that Luke was being quite hasty as he exits the room with just the two of them now.
Karen calls out to Luke and tells him that she wants to be pretty enough to stand by his side. Confused, Luke reasons that Karen was quite cute already, much to Karen's embarrassment. She exclaims that Luke was a boy, but he was so pretty. She continues that she overheard that he's been caring about his appearance and health ever since he was little. Luke notices Karen saying she overheard it. He can only think of one person who would tell her that, and that would be his sister, Iris. She always looks like she couldn't care less about him at home, but it seems like she was keeping an eye on him. Karen tells Luke that she'd like his help to grow beautiful too. Luke tells her that he'll gladly help, but he was rather strict as a teacher. Determined, Karen says that she was prepared to learn. She asks him if someone like her can also be beautiful, and Luke tells her that she can, and that it is actually a very easy way. If Luke uses Sleep and Val together, he would be able to easily make her diet, but he knew that getting thin was the only thing she wanted to have. However, he decided that that wasn't the right time to teach her everything. Luke asks Karen if they can go someplace else. Later on, they end up in his room. Luke orders syrup to make sure that nobody was spying on them. Although he may be overreacting, Luke was rather worried about his older sister after hearing what she's been up to. Calling for Karen's attention, he immediately jumps into business and tells her that his diet method uses magic, specifically to exercise while sleeping. Karen says it sounds difficult, but Luke explains the process to her. He tells her that he had sleep and sloth attributes, and that for the diet, he'll be using sleep for it to work. He summons Val as he explains that he'll combine it with an attributeless magic spell. Luke uses sleep to make Karen fall asleep and have Val enter her body, after which she will perform a set of copied movements using her body. Luke absorbs Val to show her a demonstration. He sets up sleep timer for 1 minute and orders Val to show her a light workout. A minute later, Luke lets out a breath from exhaustion. He asks for Karen's thoughts on his martial arts, and she replies that it was amazing.
Luke continues that even still, he had no memory of the actual workout. Damn, I wish I had that too. Karen nervously asks if she's able to do that too, and Luke replies that all she had to do was let Val handle the rest. He encourages her to try it, and she agrees. Sometime later, Syrup helps Karen change into more comfortable clothes. While she does so, Luke asks Karen if she was good at exercising. She replied rather sadly that she was bad at it, which is very relatable. She peeks behind the room divider with a hand over her muscles, telling Luke that she was quite strong. Luke suggests a light exercise first, so her body could get used to it. An hour later, Luke greets her with a good morning and asks how she was feeling. Lying down on a sofa, she cracks her mouth open before stammering out that she was exhausted, sweat pouring from her face. She couldn't believe that what she did was just a light exercise. Oh, this poor child. She squirms on the sofa, her whole body in pain and unable to move. Luke comes forward and uses healing magic. While he does so, he recommends that they stick to basic exercises for the meantime, so she can build her stamina, although she'll still feel some muscle pain. With a smile on his face, Luke tells her to hang in there, and Karen, with tears in her eyes, replies shakily that she'll do her best. I can already tell these two are going to be a riot as a married couple. As Karen gets up and stretches her body, Luke starts explaining his beauty regimen. He holds up a bunch of soap and tells her to foam it real good. Karen asks if it can even wash away dirt if it's all foamy, but Luke reassures her that the soap will absorb the dirt. He warns her not to rub it on too harshly or it'll hurt her skin. Karen follows his instructions, making sure to rinse her face properly and remembering to take care that she doesn't brush against her face whenever she touches it. After that was makeup. Karen was brimming with curiosity and quick on the uptake, so Luke found it satisfying to teach her. Finally was nutrition. Luke tells her that since she was good at cooking, she can just use the right ingredients, and he was sure that she could make some delicious food perfect for dieting. Karen found the idea interesting. From then on, Karen got addicted to developing new diet dishes.
Karen took all his food ideas and turned them into dishes in an instant. She was even able to replicate Japanese cuisine. Luke was happy. He thought he'd never get to enjoy the same taste in his next world. However, Luke wore an awkward smile as he stared at the feast in front of him. Karen had made way too much. Rather guilty, Karen admits that there were just so many dishes she wanted to try making. Luke tells her that no matter how healthy the food was, it still wasn't healthy to overeat.
Karen tries to reason that she couldn't throw the food away either. Without really thinking about his words, Luke suggests that they donate the food to a nearby orphanage. Karen claps her hands in excitement, thinking she can research her cooking and give anything they couldn't finish to the orphanage. She loves the idea, but Luke isn't too keen about it. He actually looks like he hates it. Since then, Karen tried making even more dishes and took turns distributing them at different orphanages every day. Luke asks if she was going to an orphanage again that day, and Karen smartly replies that he was the one that gave her the idea. Luke tags along, but the entire time he's thinking of wanting to laze about at home. As they enter the orphanage, he observes that they were rather unhygienic, so he couldn't get used to them. Not to mention that even if someone used clean, it still wouldn't completely clean the building, and there are many orphans who can't use magic and thus couldn't clean themselves. The orphans come rushing towards him, or more like towards Karen, but another orphan calls for Karen desperately. Bowing low, she begs for help because her brother fell down and wouldn't wake up. Karen wants to help, but unfortunately doesn't know any healing magic. The orphanage is managed by the church, but the priests show up only when it comes to money. Internally, Luke comments how he really didn't like the church in his world. Forced to help, he tells the orphan to lead him to her brother.
Once they enter the room, Luke realizes that it wasn't a place for a sick person to get their rest. He leans over the orphan boy and observes that his breathing was shallow, most likely from a case of pneumonia. Luke holds a hand over the boy, imagining his breathing returning to normal. His hand glows with light, and after it fades, the boy looks healthier than before. Luke steps aside, letting the orphan girl know that he should be fine. The girl collapses next to her brother, thanking Luke over and over. With a terrified look, she turns to him and asks how much his treatment will cost. But Luke brushes her question away, much to the girl's confusion. Luke explains that since he was the son of a duke, he wasn't in any need of money and just healed the boy to practice his magic. A little cold-hearted, not gonna lie, but at least he's honest and still healed the kid. Small wins, I suppose. Luke continues that now he knew how to heal that specific illness, so he should be the one to thank her. She softly asks him again before bursting into tears and bowing once more. Luke finds the girl clever, sure that she'd have a much easier life if only her surroundings were a bit better. Luke calls the Syrup and casually states that since the Duke had more money than he knew what to do with, what was stopping them from using some of it. Syrup smiles at his words and they head to the office of the orphanage director. Luke drops a whole pouch filled with 50 gold coins on the table of the orphanage director, to the older man's surprise. Luke states that the gold should be enough to get hygiene under control and to start teaching the kids. The director tries to interject, but Luke cuts him off and says that he found thinking to be quite the hassle, so the director wasn't allowed to refuse. Now that's what you call a power move. He's still 11 at this point. That's crazy. Finally, the director agrees. Internally, Luke is happy at the start of events. He'd just come to tag along at the orphanage, but ended up with something interesting. The orphanage would provide him many opportunities to test out his healing magic.
Luke, now 14 years old, sits on his cushion, suspended in air by Val. He's enjoyed the past 3 years since he's been engaged to Karen. Syrup takes care of most things for him, Karen cooks for him every day, and he's kept using Val for his beauty and health. He's definitely living the lazy life. He just wears his pajamas everywhere. He's experienced many things thanks to Karen, but his happy days with her are approaching their end. Karen will start attending the academy and will have to live in the dorms that spring. As such, he wanted to spend as much of what little time they had left together as possible. He turns to his bedroom door, which remains closed. She still wasn't there yet. He jumps off the cushion and decides to go after her, already having an idea why she was late. At the main house, Luke stops walking as he comes across his older brother, Tao, currently 19 years old and first son of the Dustos family. Luke's surprised that Tao was around that hour, which was a rare occasion. Tao passes by him, ignoring him as usual. Luke casts him a glance as he walks past, thinking how he was already taller, and yet Tao didn't care. Luke smiles as his focus goes back to Karen, sure that she was at a certain pavilion. Luke steps into the garden and finds Karen. Her diet's been a great success, and she's now regarded as a beauty, well known for her appearance and femininity. Rightfully so, she looks absolutely pretty. OMG. Luke comes closer and greets his older sister. With the brush back of her hair, Iris greets him and asks what he was doing there. He responds that he was going to borrow Karen, and Iris gets an annoyed look on her face. She darkly asks if he was trying to break up her tea party, and Luke reasons that she originally came to the estate to visit him. Luke tells her that he just came to the pavilion to take back his kidnapped fiancée. With a light blush on her cheeks, Iris stares Luke down like meat. Apparently, all men who meet Iris's eyes end up wanting to become her playthings. However, it doesn't work on Luke at all. Their stare down ends with Iris losing. Karen calls for Luke's attention and stammers that she also wanted to talk with Iris, apologizing afterwards. In Luke's eyes, he preferred the way Karen looked to his sister.
Luke takes a seat beside Karen, reassuring her that it wasn't her fault. Casting a glance at his sister, he asks her if she hasn't had enough fun. Karen is stuck in between them as the siblings argue.
Iris looks away, her face hidden behind her fan, and yet the blush on her cheeks is obvious. She urges Luke to leave them alone and that he'll be able to talk with Karen as much as he wanted in the academy. Luke tells her she was being unfair and reasons that he won't be starting until he goes to the academy the following year, so he couldn't wait until then. Karen blushes as she says that two beauties are fighting over her. You deserve the attention with how cute you are. Internally, Luke compares how cute Karen was when she was flustered. While Iris remains stubbornly sulking, deciding he had no choice, Luke gets up and leans toward Iris. He lightly tells her that she was ruining her beautiful face with the scary look she had on, and with a charming smile, he tells her to do her best in the academy. Iris's face is completely red as she stares dumbfounded at Luke. Luke, I think you did too much of a number on her. Luke holds out a hand for Karen to take. Internally, he's thinking that since he didn't get to see Iris too often, it might be good to earn some points with her. Karen takes Luke's hand, and still slightly flustered at the sudden need to leave, she says goodbye to Iris. However, Iris is breathing deeply, thinking about the expression on Luke's face from earlier. She blushes, a small smile on her face, as she thinks how he was the only man whose beauty could match her own. A bit narcissistic, ain't he? Iris decided that she wants him. Hey, a few months later, Luke is lying down in bed. Syrup asks him what book he would like to read that day. As Luke is thinking, his thoughts drift to Karen. She's already left for the academy, so there was no need for him to go outside anymore. Syrup was always the one who did the shopping, and whenever he wanted something, Luke could just call her merchants to come to him. He didn't have any friends other than Malzahn, so there was nobody for him to meet. And then his thoughts paused. He sits up with a smile and informs Syrup that they're going out.
Syrup comments that it was rare that he wanted to go outside, and she hoped that it wouldn't start raining. Luke asks her to come with him even if it does start raining. Syrup agrees and still grins at the idea of how rare it was for him to want to go outside first. Later on, a carriage speeds down the road. Syrup wore a cloak to hide her ears and tail as she drove the carriage. From inside the carriage, Luke thinks about how Syrup was good at driving, but then he remembers that she used to take him and Karen to all kinds of places. As a final thought, he sadly thinks of missing Karen. Why are they so cute? Syrup cuts off his thoughts as she announces their arrival. Getting off the carriage, Luke comments that they got to their destination, and Syrup responds that it was because of the status carried by their ducal carriage. Internally, Luke celebrates his invisible authority. Damn, he even has free passage on the streets like an ambulance. That's crazy. Luke looks up at the building before them, wondering if he would find what he came there for, the Great Mido Shop. It's a huge department store that also appears in the game he played. Players could find most things there, from items to equipment and even presents for the love interests. As they enter the building, Luke glances back to Syrup and tells her that she could buy whatever she wanted, to which she thanks him. A man greets them at the entrance. Already knowing his identity, the man introduces himself as Morsky Mido, the owner of the business. At the VIP room, Morsky invites Luke to take a seat and tells him not to hesitate to ask for anything, staff standing in attention and ready to serve him. Morsky then says that Luke might find it boring to deal with an old man like him, so he introduces his daughter to help him as a young girl walks in. Luke excitedly exclaims in his head as the girl enters. She introduces herself as Akari Mido. Akari is one of the main love interests of the game. If the player chooses her, they'll go down the merchant road. Luke introduces himself and Syrup, and Akari greets them both with respect, much to Luke's relief. He sits down, surprised that instead of just getting a glimpse of her, she ends up hosting them completely.
Akari asks him what he was looking for, and Luke asks to see anything she could recommend, especially for his beauty regimen. Bro is locked in on looking as pretty as possible. Akari excitedly claps her hands together, proceeding to show what they had for sale. First, introducing a magic hairdryer, Akari followed Luke's requests with a smile. She introduces him to one thing after the other, adding some light and witty talk in between. He ended up getting good merchandise, and by that, it meant he bought almost everything Akari offered. Luke excitedly turns to Syrup and asks if she wanted anything, but she answered that she wanted nothing. Internally, Syrup thinks of how rare it was that they went shopping together, so she wishes that he'd give her something as a present. Luke watches her carefully, but Akari gets up to get something. She takes out a box containing a red choker. Immediately, Syrup's eyes seem to sparkle at the sight of it, but then she stops herself, muttering that she was just a servant. However, without hesitating, Luke tells Akari that they were going to take it. Syrup turns to Luke in a panic. Akari hands the box over to Luke. He turns to Syrup and tells her to take it as thanks for always taking care of him. With a slightly worried expression, he asks if he was wrong to assume that she liked it. Syrup accepts with a smile. Luke clips the collar on her neck and asks what she thought. Happily looking at herself in the mirror, she says that it was wonderful. It suits her so much. Akari excitedly agrees, calling out to Luke. Syrup turns and asks for what he thought. Luke pets her cheek and tells her that it suited her beautiful white hair. Syrup is pleased with his words and grins while Luke wears a similar happy smile, glad that she likes his gift. As Luke sits back down on the carriage, Akari thanks them for paying a visit.
Luke finds the trip satisfying and decides that maybe doing similar activities every now and then wouldn't be a bad thing. After all, he has to leave home and go to the academy by the following year, so he had to experience the world outside a little before then.
Not only that, but he wants to resolve himself before leaving home and face the reason the original Luke ended up as the gross fat toad. I make jokes about the original Luke a lot, but no one is more traumatized by him than the current Luke. He changes clothes and lays back down in bed. He already has a good guess on why the original Luke ended up that way, but he still has to face it. He frowns, thinking what a pain it was that the slothful path really is difficult. There was something that always bothered Luke, and that was the original Luke's face and figure. Luke couldn't understand how he turned out like that. It was hard to imagine, given how he looked right now. Staring at his own reflection, Luke thought how he started off so well put together. Is a hedonistic lifestyle really all it took to go from the current Luke to the so-called toad in the game? Luke suspected that the food of the game world wasn't suitable for his body, but that didn't seem to be the case. The ingredients are the same. Luke also looked into the possibility of allergies or a weak constitution, but despite all that, he still hasn't come up with an answer. He contemplated food preparation and ingredients before he got the brilliant idea of asking Karen. As such, his first source was Karen. Based on Karen's letter, she says the ingredients with the properties he describes are almost exclusively toxins. Luke keeps reading the letter. Apparently, they can be used medically, but depending on the methodology, it can alter bodily processes or even produce lethal effects. Luke frowned. In that case, it might be able to explain a bizarre change in appearance. He thought it was worth looking into. His second source of information was Syrup. She repeats Luke's question, which was what he was like when he was little. She answers that until he was 4, he ate and slept a lot. He was a cute child. Completely agree. He was a tiny angel. Luke asks if there was anything off about him physically, but Syrup tells them that besides when he said he had delicate skin, he was completely fine. Syrup continues, it was that reason why she was so surprised when Luke collapsed. All the other maids in a frenzy with a joyful expression. A young Luke had been so delighted while enjoying his birthday dinner up until then.
Her head lowers as she says that his condition was unstable for about a year, making Luke remember that he ran out of mana and collapsed a lot around that time. Syrup concludes that he only got better around the time he was 6. Luke asks who prepared his meals for him back then, and Syrup answers that they used to have a chef, but he was forced to retire after the birthday dinner. Then the steward took over after that. Coming to a conclusion, Luke figures out that the head steward was the one who poisoned his meals. He finally found his answer. Later on, Luke closes the curtains and turns to a chair in the middle of the room. Sat in the chair, blindfolded and gagged, was the head steward. Luke greets him calmly. He begins by saying that he's been doing quite a lot of thinking. Much to the steward's confusion, Luke goes about saying why the original Luke was known as the gross fat toad, and if he had grown up normally, he should have never gotten to that point. With a cold look on his face, he thanks him for making Luke's food every day, but unfortunately, it never quite seemed to agree with him. He summons Val and takes a comfortable seat. The food most likely didn't work for him because there was someone trying to poison him. The steward flinches before trying to explain himself, but he remains gagged, his words muffled. With his magic, Luke rips the blindfold and gag from the steward's face. Immediately, the steward reasons in a panic that he was assigned by the Dusto's family head, or Luke's father. Luke walks closer to the steward. He figures it must have been hard for the steward when Luke refused to die and ended up getting even healthier. Luke guesses that no one cared enough to get their hands dirty, not to mention that no one knew that he could use healing magic, or that he was neutralizing the poison with it the whole time. He asks directly if the steward was the one poisoning his food, and with a shaking voice, the older man apologizes in fear.
28. Luke is surprised that he admitted to it so quickly. He found his response boring. He would have been more eager for revenge if the steward put up more of a fight. That's cold, Luke. Damn. Luke states that he'll forgive the man, and he picks up his head with hope. But then Luke raises an arm. He would forgive him only after a little punishment. The steward tries to step back in fear, but Val locks his wrist into place. Luke tells him that he won't kill him, he'll just be his test subject for his magic. He summons a magic circle. The steward is enveloped by magic as Luke grants him the gift of sloth. The steward's stressed face slowly relaxes. Luke thinks aloud to himself with curiosity, seeing sloth used on a person for the first time. He tells the steward to go back to work. Luke walks away, not clear to him that his enemy is Duke Dustoff's. The Duke probably won't care if he fires service workers like the head steward. But if Luke ends up provoking the Duke's hostility, he'll be in all sorts of trouble. In that case, Luke decides to incapacitate the Duke's pawns, powerless but still alive. As he arrives back in his room, Syrup asks where he went off to. Luke collapses on his cushion. With a charming smile, he asks if she would be happy if he was going to the academy.
Syrup asked, confused, if he was planning on not to, because she assumed he was attending. For Luke, there was a good chance that he'll be killed at the academy, so not going was a plausible choice. Luke pats Syrup's cheek as he tells her that his path forward has always been decided, and he wouldn't be with her anymore if he went, so he was still thinking about it. Syrup leans into his touch, stating that if it was possible, she would be happy to remain by his side.
Internally, Luke thinks that as long as his house is no longer safe, he has no choice but to move if he wants to protect his life of leisure. I gotta respect the consistency of chasing his dream. Luke plans to help the protagonist from the shadows, set the table for the conflict between the royals and the nobles, and, just like the game, he'll crush Duke Dustos, the leader of the nobles. It should be the easiest path with the highest survival rate. But the fact that this is the world of a game he loves hasn't changed. He was realizing again what a difficult character he's been reincarnated as, but he hopes that afterwards he'll still have a sense of satisfaction. Luke's dedicated to playing the role of the character Luke for all it's worth. He smiles. He isn't about to sit back and let himself be killed. Time passes, and it's 1 year later. Syrup bows as she wishes for a 15-year-old Luke to take care of himself as he steps away from his carriage. This boy grows up so fast, I'm close to being emotional. He enters the Royal Academy's entrance exam grounds. The entrance exam involves 3 tests: magic, practical, and the examinee's subject. Apparently, the top performers in each subject are granted scholarships regardless of their identity. Luke wasn't planning on standing out, so he wasn't going to work too hard. Beside him, an examinee asks out loud about a nearby Beastman. Luke wondered if they were taking the practical exam. The Beastman's appearance catches Luke's attention. They were a Beastman with green hair and emerald green eyes. She was one of the heroines, adventurer Ruby. Making quick zigzag jumps, Ruby rushes in to draw closer to her enemy. Her opponent is caught by surprise. He throws a punch, but Ruby easily dodges and quickly flips to deliver a kick up her opponent's chin. I can't believe they're supposed to be 15 years old. They can kick ass way too good. The powerful constitution of a Beastman combined with such unorthodox techniques. Before he can finish watching the fight, a hooded figure calls for his name. He steps forward as the man asks if he really uses magic.
Luke summons magic in his hand, annoyed. With a wave of his hand, he sends a powerful magical hit that destroys a large part of the grounds. Ruby watches, amazed, as she holds a dagger to her kneeling opponent. Her opponent has yielded. Ruby's eyes sparkle as she watches Luke. The hooded figure tells Luke that he's done enough and calls for the next examinee. Ruby lets out one more smile, interests piqued. After that, she strolls out of the exam grounds. Luke looks around, checking to see where Ruby went, but eventually giving up since they'll most likely see each other at school. Walking away from the exam grounds, Luke thinks of how the original Luke had excellent grades and incredible exam results in the game, so he didn't have a need to worry about failing. The next day, Syrup holds up a letter. They open it, Syrup's face excited, as they read that Luke was accepted into the academy. Finally, Luke's adult romance strategy simulation is beginning. Luke knows he's the one saying it himself, but he's beautiful. He stands before a full-body mirror and strikes different poses. A normal school uniform shouldn't look that good on a person. He's never seen such a perfect and beautiful man before. Can't even call it narcissistic because he really does look pretty, actually. Syrup comes up behind him and informs him that his carriage was ready. Luke thanks her. This is the day his new life starts. The Alice Royal Academy he's going to attend is the oldest and most prestigious in the kingdom. In the original game, it's the stage where all kinds of ideas and motives intersect. Almost all the nobles attended his school, like his older siblings and Karin. Recently, it has also started accepting the most talented commoners. It's begun to recruit more and more students. In the academy, you learn 3 major things: battle, magic, and study. There are many dungeons in the kingdom. Monsters tend to pour out of them all the time, too. That's why learning proper self-defense against these threats is considered part of someone's essential education. If it's proper education, kind of crazy that only the best are welcomed into the academy, besides some commoners that passed.
The academy is also part research facility. It especially focuses on magic development. Luke thought it'll be interesting to have legendary mages as teachers. In the original game, the Academy arcs serve two main purposes. One is raising the character's stats. If the player is aiming for a particular route, they'll have to manage what flags they trigger carefully. For context, flags are sort of important moments in a game that help lead you to a certain ending. A player should be extra aware of these if they want a very specific ending. The other purpose in the Academy arc is interacting with the love interests. The story and what characters the player could meet will change depending on their stats. Luke's planning on supporting the protagonist using knowledge from his previous life while playing the role of Luke, the villain that's always nearby. He needs to avoid the normal routes where the original Luke dies, although it may already be said to develop differently to the game since he's no longer the fat, ugly toad he was supposed to be. Thinking of Syrup and Karen, Luke is resolute in surviving for their sake. Syrup asks him if he remembered everything for his departure, and Luke replies excitedly that she had prepared everything for him already. Syrup gloomily admits that she was worried. With tears in her eyes and slight anger, she mourns that she wanted to join Luke and clean his dorm for him and be his attendant, if only the Academy didn't have such strict rules. Apparently, attendants may not differ in age from their student by more than 2 years. I honestly forgot that their age difference wasn't like 2 years or something. Her sense of duty has only grown over the years. The Academy allows students to have attendance since many can't care for themselves on a daily basis, but Syrup is 7 years older than Luke, so bringing her is unfortunately out of the question. Holding her hands to comfort her, Luke tells her that he would have been happy for her to come with him too, but it couldn't be helped. Syrup sadly admits that she knew. It's common for young children to have an attendant of similar age for that reason, but Luke didn't have anyone like that. She admits that she was worried about whether the attendant the Ducal assigned him will be able to do a proper job, but again, he reassures her that it'll all work out. Syrup continues that he always goes at his own pace. Luke tells her that he'll be able to take care of himself, and adds that Karen was also at the Academy. Embarrassed but sad all the same, Syrup tells him that she wanted to take care of him. Luke is touched. He raises their hands up to his lips and thinks on her wholeheartedly. Syrup has watched over him ever since he was little.